Hi, and welcome to Stories by the Fireplace. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Get cozy, maybe a blanket, and let the fire's warmth and gentle whispers carry you away. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for new stories every week. There's always more magic waiting for you here. Chapter 1. The House on Willow Street. Snow was already falling by the time Anna reached Willow Street. Fat, lazy flakes drifted from the sky, settling on the rooftops, the hedges, the narrow path that wound toward her grandmother's house. She stopped for a moment on the sidewalk, staring at the familiar old home. The shutters were still painted a faded green. The porch light still tilted slightly to the left, and the same wreath her grandmother had hung every December still clung stubbornly to the front door. But the house felt different now, quieter. Anna pulled her scarf tighter around her chin, her breath clouding in the frigid air. The weight of the key in her pocket felt heavier than she expected. She hadn't been back here since the funeral in spring, and now, with Christmas approaching, the silence of the house seemed almost unbearable. She made her way up the steps, brushing snow from the railing as she went, and pushed the key into the lock. The door creaked open with a groan, and the familiar scent of cedar and cinnamon drifted out, faint but enough to make her chest ache. Inside, the living room was just as she remembered. The worn floral sofa, the shelves lined with porcelain angels, the faded rug with a corner that never quite lay flat. In the fireplace, a few logs remained stacked neatly, as if waiting to be lit. Anna set her bag down and stood for a moment in the stillness. The house carried the weight of memory. Holidays spent gathered around the fire, the sound of her grandmother humming carols in the kitchen, the way the old clock on the mantel chimed just a second too slow. She wandered slowly through the rooms, her fingers brushing the edges of furniture, pausing on photographs framed on the walls. Her grandmother as a young woman, smiling shyly at the camera. Her mother as a child, clutching a doll with a bow in her hair. And herself, tiny, bundled in a red coat, sitting on her grandmother's lap by the Christmas tree. Back in the living room, Anna noticed a small stack of boxes near the hearth. She knelt beside them, brushing dust from the lids. These must have been left when the family had cleared out most of the belongings months ago. Curiosity tugged at her. She lifted the lid of the first box. Inside were neatly folded linens, a handful of old ornaments wrapped in tissue, and a small wooden tin at the very bottom. She pulled the tin out carefully, the lid stiff with age. When it opened, a bundle of yellowed envelopes lay inside, tied together with a faded ribbon. Her breath caught. The handwriting on the top envelope was delicate, slanted, and unfamiliar, not her grandmother's. Anna hesitated, then slid the first letter free. The paper crackled softly as she unfolded it. The words inside were written in a hand elegant yet hurried, as though the writer couldn't quite contain his thoughts. December 20th, 1954. My dearest Eleanor, the snow has come early this year, and with it, the ache of missing you. I cannot say where I will be on Christmas Eve, but if the winds are kind, I will be thinking of you by the firelight. Do not forget what we promised. Letters each December, no matter the distance, no matter the years. Always, yours truly, James Sometimes Anna's fingers lingered on the signature. James, she whispered the name softly, as though saying it aloud might bring him into the room. Her grandmother had never spoken of a James. She had always told stories of her late husband, Anna's grandfather, who passed before Anna was born. But this was someone else. Heart quickening, Anna reached for the next envelope in the bundle, but stopped herself. Instead, she sat back on her heels, staring at the firewood stacked neatly, the unopened letters in her lap. Snow tapped against the windows. The house creaked softly, settling under winter's weight. For the first time since she'd arrived, Anna felt not just grief, but a flicker of something else. Something like wonder. What stories had her grandmother kept hidden in these letters, and why? She tied the ribbon loosely around the bundle again and placed it gently on the table beside her. Tomorrow, she told herself, tomorrow she would begin. But for tonight, she lit the fire, curled up on the sofa with a blanket, and let the warmth of the flames lull her toward sleep. Outside, the snow fell steadily, covering the street, the rooftops, and the world in a hush of white. And the letters waited. Chapter 2. The second letter. The morning came slowly, filtered through heavy clouds and soft curtains of snow. Anna woke to the muted quiet that only winter mornings bring. For a moment she lay still, listening. No traffic, no city hum, only the faint creak of the old house and the occasional snap of the fire's embers. Pulling herself from the warmth of the sofa, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and padded into the kitchen. The kettle was slow to boil, but the sound of it bubbling filled the silence with something familiar. She made herself a mug of tea, the steam fogging her glasses, and carried it carefully back into the living room. On the table beside the sofa lay the bundle of letters. The ribbon had loosened slightly overnight, as if the envelopes themselves had shifted in their sleep. Anna's fingers hovered over them for a long moment before she finally pulled the second one free. The envelope was dated a year later than the first, December 1955. The handwriting was the same, steady, elegant, with that faint hurriedness in the curves of certain letters. She slid the paper free and unfolded it carefully. December 22nd, 1955. Dearest Eleanor, I write to you from a small station far from home, where the snow has stranded us for 2 days. I find myself surrounded by strangers, yet it is your face I see in every reflection on the glass. I imagine you in your warm kitchen, the smell of spices filling the air, a candle flickering on the windowsill. You would laugh to know how I envy the quiet of your evenings, the certainty of home. I do not know when I will return. Perhaps next Christmas will be ours, perhaps not. But until then, keep this letter close, and remember that my thoughts are yours. Always, James. Anna let the letter rest in her lap, her eyes tracing the loops of his signature. Again and again she whispered aloud, testing the sound of his name. James. The word seemed to hang in the air like a secret. Her grandmother had never spoken of him, not once. Eleanor had always been reserved, yes, but she wasn't a woman who hid her stories. At least that's what Anna had believed. The thought unsettled her. She glanced toward the shelves that lined the living room. They were filled with photographs, framed and dusted with care. Eleanor as a mother, Eleanor as a grandmother, Eleanor Eleanor with her husband, Anna's grandfather, Thomas, but nowhere was there any trace of this James. Setting the letter down, Anna rose and moved toward the mantel. Her eyes scanned the photographs more carefully this time. She picked up one frame, a black and white picture of Eleanor as a young woman, standing in the snow with a scarf wrapped around her head. There was no inscription, no date, just her grandmother's shy smile, as though she knew something the photographer didn't. Anna sighed, replacing the frame. She returned to the sofa and reached for her tea. The steam had cooled now, but it still warmed her hands. She wondered, who was James? A friend? A soldier? A secret love? And why had her grandmother kept his letters hidden away in a wooden tin instead of sharing them with her family? The fire crackled softly, and Anna's thoughts drifted with the sound. For a moment, she imagined her grandmother, young and bright, reading these very words by firelight, perhaps with her hair let down, perhaps with hope in her eyes. Anna leaned back against the cushions, clutching the blanket tighter around her. Snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in white, as if urging her to stay inside, to read, to uncover what had been left for her. The rest of the day passed in a haze of small tasks: tidying, lighting candles, preparing a simple meal. But her thoughts kept circling back to the letters. Each time she passed the table, her gaze lingered. Each time the fire popped, she thought of ink drying on paper, of words sealed away for decades. By evening, she had made up her mind. Tomorrow, she would read the third letter. And maybe, just maybe, she would begin to understand the story her grandmother had kept tucked away for so long. Chapter 3. The third letter the next morning broke pale and gray, the kind of winter light that seemed to blur the edges of everything. Anna stood at the frosted window, watching the snow settle thickly on the street. Cars moved slowly, their tires muffled on the powder, and every branch of the old oak in the yard sagged beneath the weight of ice. She carried her tea into the living room, the steam curling against her face, and set it down beside the bundle of letters. Her hands lingered over the ribbon, her heart tapping nervously in her chest. The third envelope sat near the middle, its paper more worn than the others, the edges softened by time. She slid it free and opened it carefully, afraid the parchment might crumble in her hands. The date at the top read, December 24th, 1956. Anna drew in a breath before she began to read. Christmas Eve, 1956. Eleanor, I thought of you tonight as the bells tolled across the city. It is not the same here. The streets are loud, the lights too bright. The voices around me hurried and strange. But in my mind, I see you at the piano, playing softly as you do, the fire casting its glow across your face. That is the home I carry with me, wherever I am sent. You asked me in your last letter if I have regrets. Only one, that I am not there with you, that I cannot see your eyes when the candles are lit, nor feel the snow settle into silence around us. Keep this promise, Eleanor. Do not let the world harden your heart. And when you read these words, know that you are not forgotten. Not tonight, not ever. Yours always. James. Anna let out a slow breath, her eyes lingering on the words. It's yours always, she whispered aloud. This was no simple friendship, no casual exchange. These were the words of someone deeply, irrevocably in love. But her grandmother, Eleanor, had married Thomas. She had lived her life here in Willowbrook, raised a family, built a legacy, and yet, hidden away in a wooden tin, were letters from another man. Anna leaned back against the sofa cushions, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. For a moment, she felt almost guilty, as though she were intruding on a secret never meant for her. But then another feeling rose, quieter and steadier. Connection. These letters had been left behind for a reason. They hadn't been destroyed or lost. They had been saved, tucked away, but not erased. Anna set the letter gently back on the table and stood, pacing slowly across the rug. She remembered how her grandmother had always hummed when she cooked, low and steady, how she would glance out the window at the snow, her eyes going distant as though remembering something or someone. Could it have been James she was thinking of all those years? The fire popped loudly, startling Anna from her thoughts. She moved to the shelves again, scanning the old photographs, and then she noticed something she hadn't before. Tucked behind a frame of her grandfather, half hidden, was a smaller photograph. She pulled it free carefully. It was faded, almost blurred, but the image was clear enough. Eleanor, younger than Anna had ever seen her, standing beside a man in uniform. His cap shadowed his eyes, but his smile was unmistakable, strong, certain, full of quiet warmth. On the back, faint handwriting read only, "Winter, 1954. Anna's breath caught. James, it had to be. She pressed the photograph to her chest, staring at the fire. The puzzle pieces were beginning to shift into place, though the picture was far from complete. That night, as she curled under the blanket by the fire, the photograph on the table beside the letters, Anna whispered softly into the silence, "Tell me your story, Grandma. I'm listening." The snow continued to fall outside, wrapping the house in a hush of white. The letters waited, patient and steady, holding their secrets for another day. Chapter 4. The fourth letter. The next morning dawned quiet, the kind of silence that only heavy snowfall could bring. Anna woke to find the windows frosted over, the light outside muted and silvery. She pulled on a sweater and padded into the kitchen, her slippers muffled against the wood floor. The kettle hissed, filling the air with steam, and soon she was cradling a mug of hot cocoa between her hands. On the table, the bundle of letters seemed to wait for her, patient and unyielding. She hesitated. Each letter she opened pulled her deeper into a story she hadn't known existed, a story that was reshaping how she saw her grandmother, how she saw her own place in this old house. She sat down slowly, untying the ribbon and sliding out the next envelope. The handwriting was still elegant, but there was a heaviness to the ink, as though the pen had pressed harder against the page. The date read, December 25th, 1957. Anna smoothed the paper against the table, her heart already quickening as she began to read. Christmas Day, 1957. My dearest Eleanor, it has been another year away, and still I count the hours as though each one will bring me closer to you. Last night I walked through the camp beneath strings of lanterns hung in the cold. Music spilled from a gramophone, thin and distant. The men laughed, some sang, others wrote hurried notes home. But for me, it was only you, always you. I carry the memory of last Christmas like a candle. Do you remember it? The snow fell so gently, and you played the old carols on the piano while your father dozed by the fire. I can almost hear it even now, though I am half a world away. They say we may be sent further still, and I do not know when I shall return. But Eleanor, promise me this. Promise me you will not let the world grow small without me. Keep the music alive. Keep the lights burning. And when you place the angel atop the tree, think of me standing there beside you. Yours with every breath. James Anna lowered the paper slowly, her throat tight. There was no mistaking it now. Her grandmother and James had shared a love so strong it had survived distance, silence, even the passage of years. And yet, Eleanor had married someone else. She had stayed in Willowbrook, raised children, built a family. The contradiction pressed at Anna's heart. Was it betrayal, or was it simply life? The choices made in the face of time and circumstance. She rose and walked to the window, staring out at the snowflakes spiraling against the glass. The town was quiet beneath its blanket of white. Somewhere in the distance a church bell rang, deep and steady. Anna thought of her own life, of the choices she had made. She had always been careful, cautious, afraid to risk too much. Her last relationship had ended not with a fight, but with silence. Two people drifting apart, unwilling to admit that love requires courage. She pressed her hand to the cold window pane, feeling the ache of recognition. Her grandmother had lived with both love and loss entwined. Could Anna do the same, or was she destined to let opportunities slip through her fingers, unclaimed? Her eyes drifted back to the letters on the table. The story wasn't finished. There were more words waiting, more secrets left behind, and with each one, she felt as though she were not only uncovering her grandmother's past, but also holding a mirror up to her own life. That night, Anna placed the letter carefully back with the others. She lit a candle on the mantelpiece, its flame small but steady, and whispered into the dim light. I won't let the world grow small, Grandma. I promise. The fire crackled gently. The snow pressed close around the house, and in the stillness, Anna felt less alone. Chapter 5. The Fifth Letter. The next day, Anna woke to a storm. Wind howled against the eaves, rattling the windows, and snow slanted sideways across the street. The house groaned softly, old wood bending against the cold. She brewed a pot of coffee and settled at the dining room table, the bundle of letters spread before her. The storm made the house feel even more like a cocoon, sealed off, safe, and strangely timeless. Her fingers brushed across the envelopes until she found the next one. The paper was creased and thin, the ink smudged at the edges. As she slid it free, a faint scent of smoke and dust lingered on it, as though it had traveled far. The date at the top was December 20th, 1958. Anna's chest tightened as she unfolded it and began to read. December 20th, 1958, Eleanor. This will be a shorter letter than the rest. Things are changing here, and quickly. Orders came through this morning, and by the time you read this, I will be moving again. Where to, I cannot write. You understand why. Do you remember the night at the river when we promised each other that if ever the world became too heavy, we would hold on to the stars instead. I look for them each evening. Sometimes they're hidden, but I still believe they are there, waiting above the clouds. That's what you are to me, Eleanor. The constant I hold to, even when I cannot see you. If I do not write for some time, know that it is not for lack of thought. I think of you every day, every hour, and if this should be my last letter, though I pray it will not, remember only this: you are my home, wherever I am in this world. Yours in every way. James Anna's hands trembled slightly as she lowered the page. The tone of the letter was different, heavier, sharper with urgency. This wasn't the gentle longing of the past notes. This was a man preparing for uncertainty, perhaps even for goodbye. Her throat ached as she whispered into the room. What happened to you, James? She thought of her grandmother again. Eleanor smiling, baking, humming carols in the kitchen, as though nothing weighed on her heart. But somewhere behind that gentle warmth had been this: an ache, a memory, a man who had loved her deeply and who might have been lost. Anna rose and began to pace, the storm thrumming at the windows. She wondered, had Eleanor chosen Thomas out of love or out of necessity? Had she known James was gone, or had she waited, uncertain, until waiting became impossible? She sat again, pressing her palms against her eyes. The questions felt heavy, but they also pulled her closer to Eleanor, as though their hearts were threaded together across time. That evening, when the storm had quieted, Anna lit another candle and held the letter close to the flame, letting its light illuminate the words. She imagined James writing them in some faraway place, his breath visible in the cold, his heart tethered across miles to a woman who might never know his fate. The silence of the house deepened, and Anna whispered softly, almost as a prayer, I'll find the rest of your story, I promise. Chapter 6. The sixth letter. The storm passed overnight, leaving the world transformed. When Anna woke, the house was silent, blanketed in snow so deep it muffled every sound. Outside, the trees glistened with ice, and the rooftops looked like sugared cakes under a pale morning sky. She padded into the living room, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, and stopped. The fire had gone cold, but the letters still sat on the table, waiting. They seemed to call to her now, as though they had been patient long enough. Anna sat, drew a blanket around her shoulders, and lifted the next envelope. The paper was different, thicker, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting slanted slightly, as though written in haste. The date at the top, December 22nd, 1959. Her breath caught. Nearly a year had passed between this letter and the last. She unfolded it carefully and began to read. December 22nd, 1959. My dearest Eleanor, it has been so long since I last wrote, and I fear the silence has already spoken more loudly than my words ever could. I was taken far from the familiar, far from everything I knew. I will not say more, but know that I have carried you with me in every step, in every night when I thought I would break. You were my strength. They are allowing us a brief reprieve now, and with it, a chance to send word. I do not know when or if I will write again, so I will not waste these lines on sorrow. Instead, I will give you joy to hold on to, as you once gave me. Picture the square in town, the lanterns strung from post to post. Picture the children chasing each other through the snow, their laughter ringing out like bells. Picture us there together, your hand in mine, the music playing. That is how I will think of you this Christmas. Not in silence, not in distance, but in joy, as though we never parted. If this should be the last you hear from me, then let it be a memory of happiness. And if I return, then I will find you, and no distance will stand between us again. Forever yours, James. Anna set the letter down slowly, her chest aching. The tone was bittersweet, filled with both hope and farewell. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine Eleanor, young and radiant, holding this letter in her hands one winter night long ago. What must she have felt? Relief at hearing his voice again, or dread that it might be the last time? Anna rose and walked to the bookshelf, scanning it again. She had begun to notice small things she hadn't before. Books that leaned against one another, gaps where perhaps something had once been. She reached for a volume of poetry, its spine cracked with age. As she slid it free, something fluttered out. It was a small envelope, unmarked, sealed in wax. Her heart raced as she turned it over. This was different. This wasn't part of the bundle. It had been hidden, deliberately tucked away. Anna broke the seal with trembling fingers and drew out a folded page. The handwriting inside was Eleanor's, not James's. If you are reading this, it means the time has come for you to know. I could not bring myself to speak these words aloud, so I left them for when the house is quiet, when perhaps you are ready to listen. There was a man once, a man who loved me with all his heart, and whom I loved in return. His name was James. Anna froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. The truth wasn't just buried in James's letters. Her grandmother had written her own, and she had left them here, waiting as though she knew someone would one day need to hear the story. Anna sank onto the sofa, the letter trembling in her hands. For the first time since opening the box, she felt as though her grandmother's voice was in the room with her, steady and warm, guiding her forward. The fire crackled to life again, and the snow pressed close against the windows, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what would come next. Chapter 7. Eleanor's first hidden letter. The envelope shook in Anna's hands. She had grown used to James's voice, steady, yearning, carrying across decades of silence. But this was different. This was Eleanor speaking for herself. Anna drew a breath and carefully unfolded the letter, smoothing its creases against her knee. The handwriting was unmistakably her grandmother's, graceful but firm, with the loops of her letters drawn with intention. She began to read, "To whoever finds this, there are things I never said aloud, truths I tucked away in the corners of memory. Perhaps I was afraid of what they might mean. Perhaps I thought silence would protect those I loved, but silence can be as heavy as sorrow. And so I write now, hoping these words will one day be enough." His name was James. He was light in the middle of war, laughter in a world that tried to swallow us whole. He saw me, truly saw me, in a way few ever did. To him, I was not just a daughter, a young woman to be married, a figure in someone else's story. I was myself, and for that I loved him. We met on an ordinary December evening beneath the lamplight of Willowbrook Square. I was carrying parcels, clumsy in my gloves, and he caught one before it tumbled into the snow. He smiled, such a smile, strong and kind. That was the beginning. The letters came later, after he was sent away. They carried his voice back to me when the nights were long. I held them close, folded and refolded, until the paper grew thin. They were my lifeline, my secret, my truth. But life has its own designs. When the months stretched into years, when news stopped arriving, I could not keep waiting. My family urged me to marry Thomas, kind, dependable Thomas. He loved me in his own quiet way, and I grew to love him too. But a part of me never left James. A part of me remained in those letters, in the snow-filled nights where I dreamt of his return. If you are reading this, know that love does not always arrive neatly wrapped. Sometimes it is joy, sometimes it is ache, sometimes it is both at once. I carry no regrets, only gratitude that I was loved so deeply, even if only for a time. Eleanor Anna lowered the page slowly, her throat tight. Her grandmother's words felt like a whisper in the room, as though Eleanor sat across from her now, firelight flickering across her face. The truth was both simple and devastating. Eleanor had loved two men, one she had built her life with, one she had carried in her heart forever. Anna pressed the letter to her chest, her eyes stinging. She thought of her own hesitations, the walls she had built around her heart. She had always feared that love was fragile, fleeting, but here was proof that love could endure even in silence, even in absence. She stood and moved to the window. The snow outside glowed softly beneath the street lamp, a mirror of that night Eleanor had described. Annie could almost picture her grandmother there, young and laughing, parcels in her arms as James reached out to steady her. The house seemed to hum with memory. Every floorboard, every photograph, every worn cushion carried a piece of the story, and Anna, for the first time, felt that she was not just discovering the past, she was being entrusted with it. She turned back to the table where the rest of the bundle waited. James's voice, Eleanor's voice, two sides of a story that was not finished yet. And she was determined to hear it all. Chapter 8. The second hidden letter from Eleanor. The letter lay folded in Anna's lap long after she had finished reading it. The fire had burned low, and the house creaked softly in the winter night, as if even its old bones remembered the weight of Eleanor's words. Anna eventually rose, placing the letter gently back into its envelope, and returned to the shelf where she had found it. Her fingers traced along the spines of the books, searching. If one letter had been hidden, might there be more? She tugged free another thick novel, and sure enough, something slid out from between its pages, another envelope, sealed with Eleanor's handwriting across the front. Anna's pulse quickened as she carried it back to the sofa. She broke the seal carefully, unfolding the yellowed paper inside. Her grandmother's voice seemed to breathe out from the page. To whoever finds this, perhaps long after I am gone, it is not easy to explain how one heart can belong to two lives. With Thomas, I built a world of safety. He was steady, reliable, kind in ways that grounded me. With him, I learned the rhythms of family, the laughter of children, comfort of tradition, the quiet peace of evenings by the fire, that life was real and I loved it deeply. But James was the echo that never left me. He was the wind that rattled the windows when the snow fell, the song that stirred in the back of my throat when I sat at the piano. I could go months without touching his letters, but then one winter night I would open the box again and it would all come rushing back. His voice, his laughter, his promises under the stars. He lived inside me, even when the world demanded I live without him. Do not mistake me. I did not live in regret. Life gives us many kinds of love, and each one shapes us. My children were my joy. My husband was my anchor, but James was my flame, the part of me that burned quietly, unseen, yet never extinguished. Perhaps some would call it disloyalty, but I believe love is not a single thread. It is a tapestry, woven of many colors, some bright, some dim, all part of the whole. I could not have been myself without both men, and though James and I never shared a life, we shared a love that time could not erase. If you are reading this, know that it is possible to carry more than one truth in your heart, and that sometimes the deepest loves are not those that shape your days, but those that shape your soul. Eleanor Anna stared at the words, tears slipping unbidden down her cheeks. Her grandmother's honesty was startling, raw. There was no attempt to smooth the rough edges, no false claim of simple answers, just truth, the kind that sits heavy and luminous all at once. She thought of her own life again, the man she had let go, not because she didn't love him, but because she was afraid of what love might demand. She had chosen safety, silence, much like Eleanor had. But now, she wondered, had she closed the door too soon? The fire crackled sharply, as though urging her to pay attention. Anna set the letter aside and whispered into the stillness. I hear you, Grandma. I understand. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was intruding on secrets. She felt like she was being guided, invited to learn not just who Eleanor had been, but who she herself might still become. The house was quiet, but Anna sensed that more letters lay waiting, more truths Eleanor had tucked away, patient for discovery, and she knew she would find them. Chapter 9. The third hidden letter from Eleanor Anna didn't sleep much that night. She lay in the guest bed beneath the old quilt, listening to the hum of the winter wind and the soft creaks of the house. Eleanor's words replayed again and again in her mind. The admission of two loves, the tapestry of a heart that could hold both sorrow and joy. By morning, the snow had begun to melt. Drops slid down the window pane like slow tears, and the street outside was quiet except for the occasional crunch of tires over slush. Anna rose and went straight to the bookshelf again. Her fingers moved more confidently this time, as though she knew Eleanor had left her a trail to follow. She pulled down a slim book of hymns. Its leather cover cracked. Sure enough, another envelope slipped from its pages. Her breath caught. She sat by the fire, lit a candle beside her, and broke the seal. The handwriting inside was smaller, shakier, as though written in haste or with a heavy heart. To the one who finds this, I must tell the part I never could speak aloud. There was a winter when the world seemed to collapse around me. The letters from James stopped. Day after day, I waited, listening for the postman's steps on the walk, straining to hear his knock at the door. Nothing came. Rumors drifted through town. Some said his unit had been moved far from here. Others whispered he had not survived. No word was ever official, no certainty ever offered, just silence, and silence can be the loudest grief of all. My family pressed harder then. Thomas asked me to marry him, gently but firmly, as though he understood I could not remain waiting forever. I said yes with a heart that was only half whole, but I told myself it was what life required, that I could not live in the shadow of unanswered questions. And then, months later, a final letter came. It had traveled across countries, worn and battered, but it carried his hand, his words. He was alive. He was coming back. But by then, I was already a wife. I cannot tell you the pain of reading that letter, knowing what I had chosen, knowing what was forever lost. I folded it carefully, tucked it away, and never spoke of it again. For how could I? How could I stand before my husband and children and admit that my heart still beat for another man? That is the truth I carry. I do not write it for forgiveness nor for judgment. I write it because love does not always align with time, and time does not always show mercy. I want whoever reads this to know that even in sorrow there was love, and that is enough. Eleanor Anna's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes burning. She could see it all so clearly. Her grandmother standing at the threshold of her life. James just a step too late. The heartbreak of timing. The cruel trick of fate. Her heart twisted. She thought of her own life again. Of the man she had once loved. Of the silence she had allowed to stretch between them until it was too wide to cross. Was she repeating Eleanor's story in her own way, choosing safety, silence, and regret over the terrifying risk of saying yes? She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. The fire snapped softly. The candle flickered, and for a moment she felt her grandmother near, not as the woman who baked pies and told bedtime stories, but as Eleanor, the young woman who had loved, lost, and kept her silence. Anna whispered into the quiet, "I won't make the same mistake, I promise." Outside, the snow had slowed to a gentle drift, as though the world itself was listening.